Going back to Aristotle, since I'm a philosopher, I have to reference at least one philosopher in my comments. The original idea of reparative justice or reparations was that the world would go along sort of okay, and then somebody would do something to harm another person or a group, maybe steal from them, kill somebody, commit violence, something like that. And the idea of reparative justice was that in addition to punishing the person and setting an example and so forth, there had to be some way to try to make up for the victim or victims of the harm what was done to them. So in the case of stealing, the person who stole would be responsible for giving back what was stolen, for providing compensation for what was lost and so forth. In other cases, it could be more complicated. Obviously, in the case of murder or something like that, reparative justice is much more complicated. But again, always the idea was that the victim needed some way to be, in some terms, made whole again, or at least to have the harm mitigated. And so when we think of reparations, it's not to try to get us back to a point that existed before the harm was done, but rather to get us to a point where the victim group actually has, if you think about rights, has their full rights, or if you think about sort of well-being and future viability, really can exist as a group, as a people, in a way that has a sustainable future, and is not sort of subject to all the legacies of the harms that were done in the past. Because one of the problems of genocide and other kinds of human rights violations is, at least I would argue, that they can be seen in part as a function of the system that we have, the global system that we have. And so if we merely help victim groups fit back into that system, what we're not dealing with is the underlying set of problems that produced the violence in the first place. So if colonialism and unequal economic relationships between, say, so-called North and South, or First World and Third World and so forth, are a real part of the global order that we have, even when a group is harmed, I think of something like the Bhopal disaster in the 1980s in India. Even if people are compensated, that's not really addressing the problem that produces these kinds of industrial damage, this kind of corporate damage to small groups and communities and so forth around the world. What we need to do with reparations is really rethink the social order that we have. And so far from just getting us back to the original status quo, what I really like to think of reparations as is a means on different levels to think about how to transform the world away from the conditions that produce the harms, like genocide and other kinds of mass destruction and oppression in the first place, to a situation where not just the specific victims we're talking about are sort of restored and have a viable future, but also other groups are not subject to the same kind of oppression and violence.